Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome back on Isabelle's talk show. And today I'm so happy because that's a new guest you've never seen so far, but I'm sure she will be back because she's got so much to tell us about creativity. So welcome, Siobhan, and I
Oh,
hope you're okay today. So before we start with the creativity and talking about self, I'm going to give you the exact topic. I want to introduce my guest. As you know, I always introduce my guest. So Siobhan Marie was raised in San Francisco Bay Area and studied in perform theater in New York City. And she's now based in Providence in Rhode Island. She enjoys being a bird nerd, surrounding herself with musicians and playing with her dog, Pierogi. I hope I pronounced properly.
close enough.
She's the owner of Blue Tomato Studio, a home for creativity coaching, joy facilitation, and feminist historical comedy. Empowering others to share their unique voices more effectively has led to working with clients as wide-ranging as Stanford University, SFO Airport, and Each One Reach One, a non-profit playwriting program for incarcerated teens. Cultivating authentic self-expression matters to her because she believes that when we're not channeling our own powerful energy into creation, it drifts into destruction, which often begins with minimizing of self. In fact, she believes it's so important to have a solid relationship with oneself that she married herself in 2019 after many years of self-negation. Nothing brings her more joy than to create space for a fellow human to tap into their own sense of playful power, even when that brings up fierce fear and bottle up tears. Bring it on. So welcome, Siobhan. I'm so happy to have you here today. And I know you're going to talk about embracing our creative self. Tell us about it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a joy to get to talk about one of my most favorite subjects. And it's lovely to be reminded of those things that I said that I believe in. And as I was preparing for this talk today, it was a little bit ironic because the perfectionist part of me wanted to get this talk perfect.
Mhm.
I spent over an hour on how exactly to start when my whole talk, a lot of my talk is really about, or what I'd like to say today is about how art helps us let go of our inner censor and about how engaging our creative selves is a way of tapping in that is experiencing internal freedom and
Mhm.
internal permission. And here I was feeling a little bit stuck on exactly how to start and getting it right. And I think that it was making me laugh because they say that you teach what you need to learn.
Okay. Uh-huh.
And so here I am on that journey. And anyway, I'm just very grateful to be able to share more about it. So I thought I would start a little bit with why. I won't spend too long here because I think most people here are on board with wanting to embrace their creative selves. But I'll share a few reasons
Mhm.
um, that came up for me as I was preparing. I mean, I could go on for days about reasons, but it's a form of connection. So engaging your creative self is a form of connecting to yourself
Mhm.
deeply and connecting to others. And we need connection as human beings. So that is a huge function that creativity plays. Um, it allows our brains a chance to relax and enter a place of flow. So
Yeah.
flow states, which we all know are very restorative for our brain.
Mhm.
That's another function that it serves. And it expands our imagination.
Mhm.
So we are living in a world right now that really could use us being tapped into the power of our imagination and our ability to imagine a world um, where all of us can, thrive together.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to take a little bit of creativity and imagination. So I think that's important. And I also,
Or even to create their own world,
yes,
I mean, I like painting, for example, and I'm in my bubble and I just paint what I see, what I feel,
yeah.
and somebody else next to me might be painting something totally different for the same topic, because that's our world perception as well. So
Yes, yes, exactly. Um, well, and I'm going to get to a little bit more about how we sometimes we worry that we shouldn't make art because we're not original enough.
mhm,
That's one of the fears that people have. And I really believe that everything has been done. You're not necessarily going to make anything original, but it hasn't been done by you. And that's a very important piece. And um, that authenticity is often much more exciting than originality. So if
mhm.
something is authentically you and it's bringing you to life, chances are very high that it will also bring your audience to life. And it doesn't necessarily need to be very original. Um, but that brings me back to why why be creative.
Mhm,
So there's a quote I'd like to share,
mhm.
uh, which is, "We must risk delight. We must have the stubbornness to accept our gladness in this ruthless furnace of the world." And that's a quote by Jack Gilbert. And this quote is at the beginning of one of my favorite books called Big Magic by
Mhm.
Elizabeth Gilbert, about creativity. And I think we're all very familiar with this ruthless furnace of the world.
Especially at the moment. Yes.
Right? Right? And so how do we live within this ruthless furnace of the world? Well, creativity and being and having access to that is one answer to it. And I believe that um it is a form of staying alive, uh
Mhm.
and bringing yourself to life. And I I think that, you know, among other things, creativity is also highly related to play.
Yeah.
And one thing I have been discovering is that play is the language of learning.
Mm.
So we minimize play and feel like we need to be productive and very serious. But in actuality, play means that we are operating from a place of curiosity.
Mhm.
Um, and we are extremely curious creatures. You know, human beings, this is sort of the other thing that I would like to talk about today, is that we have this sense that there are some people who are creative and some people who are not. And I think that's a little odd because it's actually the hallmark of our species.
Mhm.
Human beings are creative. They have been
Yeah.
making things from time immemorial, even before agriculture. And so um, there is really, in my mind, no such thing as a creative human and a not creative human.
Well,
Once,
it
yeah,
depends how you define being creative, because we can be
yes,
creative different ways. I mean, some people will rather dance, and so they will create something with the body and moving. Somebody will use colors. Somebody, as you studied as well, theater, will be another person, right? So I will
yeah.
be acting. So being creative, or just like pen and just starting writing and just like drawing something, that's creativity.
Yeah, yeah, I really want to expand this idea of what is and isn't creativity, that it even has to look like one of the arts that we know. You can well, I would argue I organized my bookshelf creatively. You can cook a dinner creatively. You
Uh-huh.
can raise children creatively. Um, it is in our nature to be creators. We are doing it all of the time. And so I think that what I enjoy about embracing the creative self is really just bringing awareness to that fact
Mm,
that we are always creating, and that creativity does not just have to look like the arts. Um, there's there's a beautiful story in Big Magic that she talks about where there was a woman who was feeling really flat inside. She hit 40 and just was feeling extremely flat, and she thought, when was the last time I was in touch with that feeling of beauty or transcendence? And it was when she was 9, when she was ice skating. And so she decided to put on ice skates and skate. She didn't change her whole life. She didn't quit
mhm.
her job and become a visual artist or, a dancer or an ice skater. She just ice skated 2 to 3 times a week before work to be in touch with that energy,
That
and that,
passion.
that and that is living a creative life. Like when you are engaging those moments
Mhm.
of aliveness, that is creative living. And so I really want to take it out of the realm of like it having to look a certain way.
Mhm. It's true. Creativity, sometimes we just think, oh, yeah, it's art. Okay.
Hmm.
But it's not. Creativity is just, in a way, listening, as you were saying about this story, listening to ourselves and just decide to be creative, doing something different or something we used to do and go back to it because it gives us joy, passion, and happiness.
Yes, yes. And in this um, society where we have a lot of focus on how productive are we being, doing something for its own sake
Hmm.
really gets lost. I mean, I think that we're pressured not to do things just for their own sake. But making art or being creative um, is valuable in and of its own sake. The process of it is. And what it adds to our lives um, is sort of, what makes them worth living, you know.
Hmm.
So I would argue that we could stand to release our grip on productivity and really let ourselves explore in that way, because it's in our nature, it's in our DNA, and it's so restorative to our nervous systems. When you are in a state of play, your
Hmm.
body feels safe. You have a lot of neurological safety going on in
Hmm.
order to play. And and i i think that in this day and age where we're pretty much always encouraged to be in fight or flight,
Hmm.
it's incredibly important to break out of that when we can, you know.
Yeah, definitely. And for our health as well, just like stepping back and doing something beautiful, whatever it is.
Yes, yes, and it's worth it, like I said, for its own sake. So i I suppose the other thing that I can touch on now is, so I've touched on why, and I would love to touch a little bit on how. Right.
Mm.
So we know it's great, we know it helps us learn, we know it helps us connect, we know that it is restorative. um, And where do we start? So I would argue that instead of worrying about finding a passion, if you don't have one,
Hmm.
you start with your own curiosity. You have that, and that your own curiosity is a very gentle way to enter the creative process. So you start with following your nose, so to speak, like
Uh-huh.
Toucan Sam, and seeing where it leads you, giving yourself time and permission to do that. And one of the hardest things is not necessarily being creative, but giving yourself that permission,
Hmm.
that radical permission to say, I have no agenda here.
Yeah, I go with the flow and
Yes,
just see what's going to come up.
yes.
Yeah, yeah, and that's when the magic starts.
That is when the magic starts. And so the step one is really remembering that it all is birthed in creativity and wonder. I wonder what would happen if I you know, bought some paints and drew an ugly drawing. and
Mhm.
it made something ugly with them. I wonder what would happen if I spent my day thinking that I was a pirate. It doesn't even matter what it is. It's just starting from curiosity and wonder. So that's the first step. And then it I would say that it's hard to get into that step because we have our censor on, our internal censor who's not giving us radical permission to do those things. And so what I do as a creativity coach is a lot of helping people move past their inner censor or work with their inner censor,
Mhm.
address the needs of their inner censor. So their inner censor might be feeling a need to keep them safe.
Okay. Can you give us a few examples of inner senses? I've got an idea, but I just want to share with you. So,
Yeah.
what are those inner senses?
Yeah. I think the inner censor is something, it's that voice that you're making a drawing and it says, this is stupid. You should be paying your bills right now. So
Yeah.
your inner sensor can demean sort of what you're doing, right?
Hmm.
Your inner sensor can also say, you can't draw that, it's too racy, or you can't do that. What would your husband think? Or, you can't
Exactly.
say that.
That was the one I was thinking of, just like, hey, you're spending time doing that, you should be doing something else,
Mhm.
people's opinion.
Yeah, yeah. So the sensor actually is a lot of our messaging that we've heard, that we've internalized, and so we're hearing it again in our own heads. And so there are a couple ways to move through this. One of my favorite books is called The Artist's Way, and one of the tools that she suggests is doing morning pages, what's called morning pages. And
Okay.
morning pages are, if you're feeling ambitious, she suggests 3 pages, and you don't stop writing.
Okay. Non-stop. Okay.
And the goal is not to be good or funny or come up with the next, bestseller. It's to really just let your mind uh, experience itself, and your sensor is going to show up and you're going to put it on the page. And once your sensor is a little bit exhausted, sometimes your creative self shows up. So after
Hmm.
the internal sensor has gotten through a lot of the things that they want to say, they're kind of a wet blanket. Little nuggets will also crop up, like, I wish I could go surfing. Wouldn't that be fun? And then what you start to notice about your morning pages is that there's themes. So you're like, God, I've written about surfing for, you know, 4 days now. I think I really want to do that. And you start to give room and space for that voice to arise. Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know if you've noticed, but the world is a very noisy place.
Oh, yes. Yes. But when I paint, I manage to get in my bubble and sometimes I forget to eat because
Yeah.
I'm so into the drawing, the colors, the experience as well, the emotion of painting that I'm just like, I forget that I'm hungry.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that is one of the beauties of being engaging in an artistic process, is that we can step outside of ourselves for a moment, and the internal humdrum that's always going on and the external demands that are always going on, and we get a break from it. And I think our brains really need that.
Mhm.
Um so so that's one tool that you can use with your sensor. I mean, another tool that I really love is mm, naming it.
Mhm.
So you might have, let's see, Critical Kathy. And Critical Kathy just says the same thing. She just says, this is ridiculous. You're a 40-year-old woman. Why on earth are you putting on roller skates and skating around with 9-year-olds? Right. That's what Critical Kathy might say. We name her and we draw her and we engage with her a little bit. We say, I see that you're trying to keep me safe, you know, and I
Okay.
really appreciate that. You're working
Mhm.
very hard to keep me safe. And I want you to know that you can stick around, but I'm going to be, um, doing this project with my creative self. So you're welcome to be here, but I'm going to move forward now.
Yeah. And if not, it doesn't matter. Yeah, I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah, but you treat her with respect and you understand that she really wants the best for you and that it's okay to include her, but she just doesn't get to drive the bus, you know.
Exactly.
And your inner allies. So if you have critical Kathy in there,
Mhm.
you may also have I've kind of thought of I haven't named her yet, but I suppose Peacock Patty, let's call her, who
Uh-huh.
wants to show off.
Well,
Wants-
exactly.
yeah, who wants to be very flamboyant. And so we don't have to just engage with those parts that are kind of overly scared. We can also engage with those parts of us that are leading us forward, and that it takes some practice, like any relationship. So you wouldn't just expect to have a marriage by seeing the person once. You know,
Mhm.
you see them all the time, and you engage with them in different ways. And so same goes for our inner allies, I like to call them, is that it's an ongoing practice. And that actually brings me to my next point, which is that it really is a practice.
Mhm.
So waiting until you're in the mood is kind of a recipe for disaster. It's really helpful to set aside some structured time to engage, and yeah, and not expect brilliance at the start.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Expectations.
Yeah, when we shift our definition of success, that helps. So success is showing up. Success is I enjoyed myself drawing this drawing. You
Mhm.
know, success is not um it looks better than, my buddy Susan, who also draws. It looks better than her drawing. It That's not success. Success really is showing up, and we want to be creative, but we don't want to have to go through that ugly duckling phase of bad ideas or cliche looking art. But
Mhm.
I actually think that, you know, we don't get to grow without those parts, and those experiences and those things lead us somewhere else.
Mhm.
So if when we can trust, hey, this is going to get me to another idea down the line, and I needed to make this drawing first, and then later it might look a different way, but
Yeah.
engaging it with a sense of curiosity rather than
And being compassionate as well with ourselves and just say, okay, well, I'm starting, so I can't expect to be perfect. And there's no perfection anyway. Yeah, and
Mhm.
especially with art, is 'cause I remember my mom saying to me, "But I don't see the same thing as you do." Looking at a painting in a museum, and I was just like, "But that's the beauty of art because that's through your eyes. That's so totally different." So when we draw, when we paint, or when we dance, or when we anything of art is comes from the heart, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
So it doesn't matter. And if somebody says to you, that's ugly, it's just like, well, that's my perception, and that's my emotion. And when you were saying about setting time and not doing it when we feel like fantastic, sometimes it's just nice to get like a piece of paper. You come back from work and you're angry, something happened, and just like stop, and that's it. That helps.
Yeah. Yeah. And that what it was, it, just the act of doing that is enough.
Exactly.
It doesn't need to be more. And that putting a lot of pressure on it to be something else kind of has it go away. So, well, it can make the impulse go away. So one of the other ideas that I really like from the book Big Magic that I've tried to start working with in my own life is this idea that well, ideas, creative ideas are um energetic sort of beings of their own. They have their own identities and they
Mhm.
come through us, right? Like we channel them, so to speak. And it's still personal to us because it is coming through us. So it's filtered through us. But it's a collaboration
Mhm.
more than anything else. So the ancient Greeks used to say that they were visited by genius rather than that they were geniuses.
Mm-hmm.
That genius was something that came upon them and visited them. And I think this idea is really useful for lots of reasons. It gives you some healthy psychological distance from what you're
Yeah.
creating, because
Mhm.
it's just like, okay, this idea really wants to be born. It's knocking on my door. I'm going to open the door. We're going to work together. We're going to see what happens. And if it doesn't turn out the way I envisioned, that's okay. If it turns out wonderfully, I don't take full credit. And if it turns out terribly, I don't take full blame. It's
Or you
just a
can
process
actually
of
blame the other.
yeah, right. You're like, I guess that just idea itself wasn't so good,
Uh-huh.
you know? But I think that thinking about it as it doesn't have to be entirely self-generated. That ideas are just constantly around us, knocking at us, like wanting us to work with them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, is a really well, I find it to be a really empowering way to look at it. And I think that when I get stuck in perfectionism, it really gives me a breath of fresh air.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. And sometimes as well, you were saying that, well, you were talking about time. Sometimes we don't take the time to be curious or even to look around us. We go for a walk or we go and get the bread or maybe having a look, different colors, well, people, the way they dress. Oh, yeah, that's inspiring. And emotion, I don't know, a new shop, right?
Mhm.
Being curious and why not come back and just start growing, start cooking based on, oh, I saw that restaurant, just looking around. We have forgotten to do that. We tend to look at that.
Yes, yes,
So,
yes. Um, I do think that I have several people that I work with who would really like to spend less time looking at their phone and more time creating, and hearing what's inside of them, as opposed to receiving all of the time, receiving information. Um, so I think that it's an important way to come into balance with,
mhm,
with the internal and the external, is to give yourself a creative practice. And like you said about seeing the world, once you start engaging your creative practice, you get to see things a little bit differently. Um, One of the games that I like to play is called, um, well, I have a couple. There's one called Get It Wrong that's really fun, where I just ask you a question and your job is to get it wrong. Um, but
that's really against nature, or
yeah,
against what we are being taught.
yes, yes. But it's so freeing. I mean, when I play it
Yeah,
with people, they just
of
laugh.
course.
Like if I say, what color are your eyes? And you say cow shaped, all of a sudden your brain is like, oh, great, we're playing right now. We get to see
Uh-huh.
things differently. And another one is, yeah, along those lines, you walk around a room and you point at different objects and you call it by the wrong name, you know? So like, there's an octopus here behind me, and you know my hair is made of spaghetti, and you go through these different things, and it really does. They've done brain studies. I wish I studied brain science more, but it really does get your synapses firing in a different way. And then you walk outside and you notice more, you see more is available to you when you engage in that. So mm, and the world can get very heavy, and mm, we can put a lot of rules on how it needs to be. Um, and I really believe that creativity is like the yeast that makes bread rise.
Hmm.
So you would it's not frivolous. It's helping things come into balance, because we have all of these very serious things that we need to get through, and we do have a lot of responsibility. But also, if we don't combat it with a little bit of levity and play and beauty, we're really out of balance, and
Yeah.
our mental health suffers, and
Hmm.
we need that more than anything these days. So that's one way that I think about it when I start to go down the rabbit hole of like, do I have the right to be doing this right now? Um, I, I know I've been talking a lot, but there's another part of having create a creative life is curiosity and also courage. And there's a poet, David White, who says the audacity of belonging.
Mhm,
And like, I am audacious enough to belong here,
mhm.
that to have a voice and to express myself. And it's not easy to build up
Confidence.
that confidence in order to do that. But it is a worthwhile venture because, our souls are just like so hungry for it. And um yeah, and so I would say that in terms of the recipe book, curiosity, well, I would say curiosity, consistency, and courage. So if people are looking for just some easy ways to start, that that
Mhm.
that's yeah.
Great. And tell us a bit about your clients. I mean, are they artists? Are they writers? I mean, wh-
Yeah.
how do you help them and to find their creativity? I mean, not in details, but to give us some successes, like somebody who was probably looking at the phone all the time and suddenly managed to slowly tap into their creativity to balance their life.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I can think of a couple examples of who has shown up at my door. And um one one woman has a very demanding job that requires a lot of emotional labor. um and uh needs a place to move through those emotions. And
Hmm.
so by working together and building some space for that, she's able to be more in balance. um you know, Therapists, nurses, people who take care of people,
Uh-huh.
really energetically have a need to fill the well themselves. So, one of the practices that we have is she might be short on time, but she can come home. And the first thing she does after she changes is write one sentence.
Okay.
That's
Right.
it. Because
Hmm.
because it's going to grow from there. But right now, writing one sentence, and she also wants to commit to doing one online improv class. So that's the other thing she wants to
Wow.
do. Yeah, but micro stepping, which is, I don't know if you're familiar with micro stepping. Yeah, but just
Mm.
tiny little changes that feel very accessible have big impacts. So that's one example of a client, a typical client. And another might be a woman who sees she's a doula, and she sees her doula work as separate from her artwork. Well, she sees them as connected, but
Hmm.
she has a hard time expressing that to other people. So I'm helping her put language to the ways in which her doula work is reproductive justice, and the way that the art that she creates, like the products that she creates with love. Oh, sorry, that's my pup.
No
Um,
way.
Support each other. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm helping her build that bridge. Um,
Mm.
and lastly, there's a woman who has a very demanding job. I mean, I think this is a theme that people have very demanding jobs and need some sort of outlet, and used to draw as a young person and have it flow. And that's really, she wants to reclaim some of her time.
Hmm.
And so the practice that we're doing now is um, uh, creating a portfolio. So anytime she feels inspiration, she's putting it into a little portfolio. And even just sharing it with me is
Hmm.
is keeping it alive.
Yeah.
So, like, she knows that, okay, in 2 weeks I can share these inspirations with someone. Um and that sort of helps keep it going. Yeah. So those are some of the examples that I think of when I think of my clients. And we all have so much responsibility, you know. And so meeting with someone like me, it really helps give us that permission and that structure and different exercises that they may not have thought of in order to engage the creativity.
I agree. Different angle, different situations, challenging them in a
Hmm.
way, and
Hmm.
just like giving them confidence that they can paint, they can draw, they can sing as well.
Hmm.
Like write or play or act. I mean, so and not feel guilty about it.
Yeah. Yes, I think that's a big piece of it. Um, removing so a lot of coaching is, I mean, is shifting beliefs. So we have a lot
Uh-huh.
of beliefs around play and its legitimacy as something we're allowed to be doing. So one thing that a client of mine is doing is investigating some of her different parts of self,
Mm-hmm.
like critical Kathy or some of these other parts of self, and what are the beliefs that they hold, and how can we rewrite some of those beliefs so that
Mm-hmm.
we're supported in that. But she was able to see that, her grandmother was a person who never stopped moving and never rested, never gave herself permission to rest or to play. Um, and so that is just deep in there. And
Yeah.
that's not a bad thing. It's just something to notice and
Mhm.
approach with curiosity. What would
Yeah,
happen if I let myself have an afternoon where I I made playfulness, even if I'm just washing the dishes,
yeah.
um, I made playfulness the center of it.
Mm-hmm. Sing along, dance.
Mhm. Mhm.
So yeah, definitely. Well, Siobhan, thank you very much. So I wrote down, so being curious, follow your nose. I love that. Identify your inner senses with the morning pages, minimum three, huh? Minimum three.
Mhm.
Or naming them, like we were talking about critical Cathy and peacock Patty. So
Uh-huh.
that's the lie. And so practice and set times for practice, right? Making sure that we don't slip up and setting time. So anything else you want to share with us?
Um, Also that, well, if you can, involving someone else in the process that you
Mm-hmm.
trust is a really helpful way to reawaken or keep keep in touch with your creative self,
Mm-hmm.
because I have come from an experience of trying to do it all alone.
Mm-hmm.
And when I have started looping people in, either as accountability buddies or we share work with each other, um, it just makes it deeper and longer lasting, more
Yeah.
meaningful, more fun.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can, involve, bring somebody in.
Yeah, yeah, and share as well. Share, and you get some ideas as well from the other
Mhm,
person. So
mhm.
by share, wow, that's fantastic. So I know you've got something coming up soon. Well, in January, which is tomorrow.
I know.
Yeah, time flies. So tell us about your program.
Yeah. So speaking of doing things together and not alone, um, I'm doing an Artist's Way group journey,
Mm,
and it's 12 weeks long. And we're going to meet once a week to reflect on the chapter and share our experiences over the week. And we do that, for 12 weeks. And I think that, again, they say, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go
yeah.
far, go together.
Uh-huh.
And I really have felt that way. So I'm starting that in January, and I'm very excited about it. Right now, um, my signups aren't together just yet, but you can email me, and I
Yeah.
will email folks as soon as the sign up list happens. And I want this to be a really accessible program. Um, so it does not cost an arm and a leg to join. I want it to be really accessible. I really want people. I have been a part of so many beautiful communities, and I'm excited to host one myself. Um, and just briefly, if people are curious, of the 12 weeks, here's the themes for the different 12 weeks. There's
Mhm.
recovering a sense of safety, a sense of identity, a sense of power, integrity, possibility, abundance, connection, strength, compassion, self protection, autonomy, and faith. So each week, you know,
Different thing.
mhm, we do a deep dive into those themes, and yeah, I'm very excited to collect folks who want to work together and support each other.
That's fantastic. Well, I've put the email, I mean, Siobhan's email in the description and her website. So feel free to contact her, not the website, but the Calendly, the schedule. So you can schedule a call with Siobhan. So she will explain more in details about the program, about what she does, and combining coaching, creativity, joy. That's really fantastic. So thank you ever so much, Siobhan.
Yeah.
So come back and tell us more about creativity and joy and art. Well, next year. I mean, yes, next year.
Yes, I will. I'd be happy to report on that. It's one of my favorite subjects, and I know for me it has really kept me alive and kept me engaged in the world in a way that sometimes we really want to retreat. Um, and so it's been a gift to me. So I'm excited to share it with other people.
Oh, great. Thank you very much, Vaughn. So my guest next week will be Daisy Hilbrands and from Germany. And she's going to talk about communication and how to facilitate in an introvert friendly way. So if you're an introvert, that's the talk show for you. So, and in the meantime, if you've missed the previous talk shows, don't worry, click on YouTube, look for Phoenix Coaching and Training, subscribe, click on the little bell for the notifications, and you won't miss any anymore. So thank you ever so much, Siobhan. So come back next year, and audience, I'll see you next week.